All right, guys, I'm going to show you real fast how to test your electrical panel and stuff here for your crypto mining operations so you can get up and running. Now, keep in mind, I'm not an electrician, and if you don't know what the hell you're doing, you will literally kill yourself doing this, okay? So if you don't know what you're doing, get an electrician, get somebody who knows what they're doing to actually do this for you. All right, now, when you're working on a panel, you do not want to be direct path to ground. Okay, what I mean by that is that you want to put down a board or a rubber mat or something like that and stand on when you're working on a power panel, especially when it's hot. I'm standing on a wooden floor inside of a building, so I'm not a direct path to ground. Now, if I was working on an electrical panel outside, I'm standing on the ground, right? So I am a direct path to ground. So I would want to put a board down or something and stand on it. Most guys don't do it, but if you don't know what you're doing, it's something you should do just for safety's sake. So I have a 200 amp service panel, then I have a 200 amp disconnect, and then I have a 200 amp basically residential panel. Okay, so the 200 amp disconnect acts as a sub panel, and then this is a sub panel of that sub panel. Okay, the only place where your neutral and your ground should be bonded together is inside of your 200 amp service panel, okay, which is where your meter is located. All your sub panels, everything like that, the neutral and the ground should never be bonded together. Now, because we're working on a hot panel, some of the footage I showed you, I was pointing with my finger. You never do that. Always use either, a pin or a Sharpie, something like that, something that's plastic, to use it as a pointer so you can actually point to stuff. In the top of the panel, you want to have this green ground screw installed, which basically grounds the ground bar to the panel itself. Okay, so that's something that you have to have. Now, test these two wires coming in, which are hot from the service panel, is you would turn the service breaker off, the main breaker off, and both of these should read 0, which tells us that the main service breaker is functioning properly. When we turn that service breaker on, both of these wires should read 120, and together they should read 240 volts. So the main service breaker is on, and the way I can do that is I can use this tester right here, and what it does is if I put this up here, you can see there's nothing on the panel. But if I come down here, that's hot, and that's hot. So both of those wires are hot coming in. So even though this breaker here, this main breaker is turned off, these two wires coming in, they're still hot because they're on at the service panel, okay? So when you're messing around with one of these panels, never touch these lugs. These newer panels like this one here, they actually put these plastic covers on there, which is actually a really nice safety feature, so that way you don't accidentally bump it. Actually, I like how they do it. It's cheap, but it's a simple solution, okay, to keep guys from getting electrocuted, especially homeowners. So what we'll do is we got a volt tester here, and volt tester has DC and AC. We're going to set it on 600 volts AC because we're going to be testing for 240, and it basically, my tester here is 200 volts AC, and then it goes to 600 volts AC, so we'll have to use the 600 volt setting. So that's what we're going to be testing with, and you can pick these up for like 50 bucks or less, depends on the brand. So the first thing you'll do is you're going to take your tester and you're going to put it right there on that ground, and then the next thing you're going to do is you're going to touch the outside of the panel. This tells me that this panel is not hot. I'm going to test the neutral. Okay, I should have zeros. Okay, that tells me that the ground and the neutral is working. That way we don't have an open neutral or something. Okay, and you touch the side of the panel. All right, now the main bus up here, when I do this, I should have 0. I should have 0. There shouldn't be nothing coming in on that main bus. Okay, because this breaker is in the off position. Now, when I touch this lug here, because that main service breaker is on, I'm going to get 120. I'm getting 122 volts. If I come over here, do this side, I'm going to get 122 volts. Now, if you had your main service breaker off, when you just did what I did there just now, you would read 0, 0, okay? If you're getting voltage, that means something's wrong somewhere. And probably it means that your main service breaker is then gone to the bad and it needs replaced. So, what we're going to do now is we're going to test both of these for 240. So I'm going to stick this in here like so, and I'm going to stick this in here like so. We're going to test this, and we're getting 244 volts. All right, so this panel is working good. Okay, so everything's functioning properly. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this on. When you turn a breaker on, put your hand on the breaker, look away, close your eyes, because if this thing blows up, you don't want it blowing up in your face and blind you. Hand on the breaker, look away, eyes closed, turn it on. Now, you can use a block of wood. It's good to have a block of wood or something like that in your hand when you do that. That way, you're not touching that breaker. Okay, so that's something that you can also do. I've already had this on. I've already tested everything. I'm just going back over it for you guys. So what we'll do now, since we got the panel on, everything in here is hot. This whole bus bar, everything's hot now. Okay, so this is where you get electrocuted if you're not careful. So what we'll do is we're going to go right here to ground. First thing we're going to do is put this on the ground. And now we're going to touch the outside of the panel. You have to do this because if there's a short in this panel is now hot. Okay, you want to make sure just randomly touch it a couple different places. You should have all zeros. Okay, tells you everything's working. Next thing we'll do is we're going to test our neutral. Okay, we're getting 0. That's good. That's what we want. We're going to test the main bus bar. We're getting main bus bar. We're getting 122 volts. Come over here. We're getting 122 volts, which is good. Now we're going to test all these breakers. We want to make sure our breakers are functioning, right? So we want to see all zeros, every breaker. I'm getting 0. I'm getting 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And all these breakers are in the off position, okay? So by doing this, I'm testing each one of them. I'm reading 0. Now, what happens if I touch one of these breakers and I get like 10 volts or 20 volts or something like that? Well, it tells me that the breaker's no good, the breaker's bad. And that's why we're testing. That's why we test all the breakers like this. Okay, because if you have a bad breaker, you're not going to know about it unless you test and see. Okay, you might have the breaker in the off position and say, oh, well, the breaker's turned off. Well, you go mess with the wiring and you electrocute yourself. Why? Because the breaker's no good. So test your breakers, make sure they're functioning properly, okay? They might have one bad breaker out of every million they produce, but you're lucky enough to get it. So, yeah, that's what you don't want, okay? So now we know this is all good. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to test these breakers here. These are our ground faults. Okay, this is a 30 amp double pole ground fault breaker, which goes to our L630R plugs down here. Okay, R for receptacle, P for plugs. So this is an R630R. This is an L630R for R for receptacle, and then the P's are for plugs. Put our hand on the breaker. We're going to close our eyes, look away, turn it on, breaker's on. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to test this. So get our pin, put it right here on this ground fault, push the button, should trip it. Trip. Now, we're going to reset it. What you always have to do anytime a breaker trips, you always have to push that breaker into the off position and reset it. Then you push it into the on position. Boom. Okay, so that's good. Now, that breaker's hot. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to come over here. We're going to put the tester back on the ground again. And then we're going to come right here. We should be getting 122 volts. We come up here, we're getting 122 volts. This is a double pole breaker, which means it supplies 240 volts. Okay, it's not a single pole like these up here, which only gives you 120. Now we're going to test both sides of the breaker. We're getting 244 volts, which is good. Now we'll set our volt tester down here. Be careful not to electrocute ourselves by hitting those terminals. And then we're going to come down here to the plug. We're going to put the black in the ground, stick that in there, and then we'll put the red in the hot side, 122 volts. We'll put it in the other hot side, 122 volts. That's good. And now we'll put these both into the hot ones, each hot ones. And I should be getting, if I can get it here, 244 volts, which tells me this receptacle is wired properly. So now what we'll do is we're going to reach up here and we're going to turn this off. Look away. And we're going to take this receptacle here, which is breaker 19, which goes to this receptacle right here. We're going to turn this on. Put our hand on it, look away. Okay, it's on. Now we're going to test this real fast. The way we'll do this is we'll go back here. We're going to put this on the ground again. Okay, and then we'll come up here and we'll test that breaker. And it reads 122 volts. Tells me the breaker's working properly. Now we'll come down here and we're going to test this. So this right here is a plug that you can buy. And as you can see, it's got 3 lights on it, and it tells you it's wiring. If the 2 yellow lights on top are both on, it's working properly. So we're going to use that right here to test this. So all I got to do is just plug that in. I got 2 lights, which tells me it's wired correctly. There's nothing wrong there. It's working just fine. Okay, so that's working. I got 2 lights. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and plug that in right there like so. And what we'll do is we'll take our marker. We'll reach down here to this test button on this ground fault, and we'll push it in. Look away, and then the lights went out, which also tells me that this receptacle is wired correctly to this receptacle, which is the ground fault receptacle. Now, if you wired it incorrectly, this receptacle here would not have ground fault protection. Okay, it wouldn't be working properly, even though this receptacle is working properly and it's tripping, this receptacle wouldn't, but it's working fine. So now what we'll do is we'll hit right here, we'll push in on the reset, look away, press the reset in, came right back on. Okay, tells me this is working properly. Now, what you want to do now is you want to do an actual test. So we'll set our tester up here. Because what will happen with these little testers here, I'll tell you, is these lights on top, they'll flicker. And if they're flickering, it means you're getting a bad connection. So instead of getting, let's say, 120 volts, you might be getting 50 or 40, and these lights are flickering, which means you could have a loose ground wire, a loose neutral, or the hot wire's loose, and then that way you're going, in that case, you're going to have yourself a fire. So what we'll do is we'll stick the black down in the bottom, and then we'll put it on the top right-hand side, which goes to our hot. So I'm getting 122 volts. We'll take this now, we'll stick it over here on the neutral side on the top left. We're getting 0, which is good, which tells me we don't have any short circuits or anything loose in there or anything. If we was, for example, let's say getting voltage here, let's say when I'm touching the neutral and the ground together, that means I got like, I got an open circuit or something like that. The ground and the neutral are touching, and we have a problem. So I'd have to open this up and look at it. So now we're going to take the hot and the neutral and touch them together, both of them back together. And what I should get here is I should get 122 volts, which is what I'm getting. So everything's working good here. This is wired right. And voltage, guys, I'm going to tell you this. Voltage is going to vary. You might be getting 120. You might be getting 110. You might be getting 125. I mean, it's just in that common area, okay? So it just depends on where you're at. But anyways, guys, this is all working properly. All the receptacles are working. Breakers are working. We tested everything here. This gives you a quick overall on, you know, how to do your testing. And you would test every single one of these breakers, every one of these ground fault receptacles, and you're going to go through and test all this stuff. And it takes a while. I just tested one 30 amp double pole ground fault breaker and then one 20 amp standard breaker, and just tested that for you guys. But yeah, with that being said, guys, this is more or less how you test your power panel, stuff like that. If you're going to do it yourself, be very careful. You will kill yourself. If you get electrocuted, you have to call 911, and you got to go to the ER and get your heart tested, okay? So you either call 911 or drive yourself. It doesn't matter, but you have to go get your heart checked out, because electricity, if you get shocked, it can knock your heart out of rhythm. And a lot of electricians, what happens to them is they'll get electrocuted, and it's like, oh, not a big deal, I've been electrocuted before. They go home, and then they die later that night because their heart stops. They killed them. They got electrocuted in daytime, knocked their heart out of rhythm, and their heart stopped later that evening. So you got to go to the hospital. You got to get checked out if you do get electrocuted. So just keep that in mind. But anyways, I'm going to turn this main breaker back off. Everything in here is turned off right now. So I'm going to go ahead, install my service panel covers, get these screws out of here, because these screws, there's no reason for them to be in there. But other than that, guys, that's how you test your power panel. Pretty much that covers all the electric here on our mining shed. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe to my channel. And, you know, feel free to send me a donation to one of the crypto addresses below. A lot of money went into this, a lot of time went into this. And, you know, I don't monetize my channel for certain political reasons, you know, so yeah, every bit helps. So yeah, definitely, you know, give me a donation or something if you found this helpful. And thanks for watching. Thumbs up the video, like and subscribe.